In this episode of Custard, Heaven and Hell by Black Sabbath.
Okay, today's album we're going to take a look at then is this one. Black Sabbath, Heaven and Hell. The first of the albums to feature Ronnie James Dio after he replaced Ozzy Osbourne in late 1979, early 1980. Now, in 1979, early 79 in fact, Ozzy Osbourne's behaviour became just a little bit too much for the rest of Black Sabbath and Tony Iommi in particular to tolerate, and it was clear something would have to give. Now, don't forget, he'd already been kicked out of the band once before, and over a year had been wasted after he came back with drug-fueled alcoholic stupors and little or no new material being produced at all. And with record company pressure to record an album increasing, Iommi took the decision to fire Osbourne from the band. At the time, for many, a Black Sabbath without Ozzy Osbourne was an unthinkable proposition, when it had been briefly attempted before in 1977 with a chap called Dave Walker on vocals. Reaction to their one and only appearance on the BBC tea time television programme Look Here had not been particularly favourable, and Osbourne had returned to the ranks soon after. However, 1979 was a different time altogether, and with rock music just about to embark on a new lease of life thanks to the beginnings of the new wave of British heavy metal, or NWOBHM as it became called, Black Sabbath, as one of the pioneers of hard rock music, could not afford to be left toiling in the wake of the younger, hungrier bands. Now, on the suggestion of Sharon Arden, the daughter of Sabbath manager Don Arden, and ironically future wife of Osbourne, Ronnie James Dio had recently fallen foul of Ritchie Blackmore's constant need for change, had been fired himself from Rainbow, was approached with a view to replacing Osbourne. Dio officially joined the band in June 1979 after a few secret writing sessions with Iommi, which took place before Osbourne had officially been fired. At the time, Geezer Butler was unsure of whether he wished to remain in the band and briefly departed to be replaced by Craig Gruber, Dio's old mate from the Elf and early Rainbow days. Butler later returned and is pictured on the back of the cover, but Gruber has claimed that it's actually him playing on the album, although this has been denied by Tony Iommi several times. Jeff Nichols of Courts was also brought in to play keyboards and may at one point have handled some bass playing duties in the initial sessions. The use of Martin Birch, who had worked on many of the Deep Purple, Rainbow and other Purple family associated albums as a producer, led to the band briefly being sarcastically referred to as Black Rainbow. In fact, Martin Birch went straight from this to the Ready and Willing album by Whitesnake. Not a bad 1-2 there for Mr. Birch. Now, Heaven and Hell was recorded at the Criteria Studios in Miami and the Studio Former in Paris, with the initial sessions starting on October the 1st, 1979, and it was a complete change of style for a band known for hard riffing and less than melodic vocals. Dio was about as far removed from Osbourne as you can imagine, and there was a great deal of anti-Dio feeling from hardcore Sabbath fans at the time. Osbourne had a limited range, but Dio had one of operatic stature, and he was happy to sing across the riff and bring in his own vocal melody rather than sing directly to the tune of the song. And it gave them more scope to experiment with song structure, and it also gave them a more tuneful and melodious sound, but without having to sacrifice any of the heaviness. Opening track Neon Nights is a perfect example of this, as it comes thundering out of the speakers at 1,000,000 miles an hour with a typical Iommi riff, and Dio's vocal melody bears no resemblance to it whatsoever. It is as heavy as anything that the Osbourne lineup came up with, but has far more melody and is far more accessible to a mainstream audience, a fact proven by its lofty chart position of 22 in the UK singles chart, All of the tracks on the album are credited as D.I. Iommi Butler Ward compositions, but in all likelihood all tracks were penned by Dio and Iommi alone. Butler's entire contribution to the album is open to speculation, but Neon Nights was the last of the new tracks to be written, and by that time Butler was back on board, so it's fairly safe to assume that it is Butler playing on this track, although whether he really had any input into the composition is doubtful. Drummer Bill Ward, by his own admission, had no recollection of any of the recording sessions due to his substance abuse at the time, and I would seriously doubt that he had any input into any song compositions at all. The fact that the riffs always came from the prolific Iommi and the Dio lyrics were obviously ones that he had in mind for the next Rainbow album, as they bear no resemblance at all to the usual Sabbath type lyrics, lead me to believe the decision to declare group composition was a political one rather than an artistic one. Throughout his entire career, Dio has always stated on his albums all lyrics and melodies by Ronnie James Dio. From that opening track, which, as I said, was the final one recorded, we go straight into the first one that was recorded, which was Children of the Sea. Now, that began live at the very first Dio and Iommi writing session in early 1979, before Osbourne had been fired, remember. Starting with an acoustic intro and a slightly falsetto lyric from Dio, it soon builds into a classic Sabbath riff and song. The low-key choral moaning chant towards the end is classic Sabbath, though. It quickly became a live favourite, and is clearly not just one of the album's highlights, but also one of the best tracks that Sabbath in any incarnation ever recorded. Lady Evil starts off with a bouncy, almost funky riff, and its subject matter vaguely reminds me of Starstruck from Dio's Rainbow days. In fact, this could almost be Starstruck revisited, and along with the album closer is the most Rainbow-like offering here. Probably explains why it's one of my favourites as well. Iommi throws in a great dual-pace solo, and I'm surprised this one didn't get a worldwide release as a single. There was an edited version which has since been issued on the remastered version of the album, but as far as I'm aware, this didn't see mainstream release as a single in larger territories. The first half of the album ends with the title track, a track which has since become a staple of radio rock stations the world over and is as recognisable as any rock song ever written, really. Iommi came up with the initial riff and tune during the aborted final sessions with Osbourne, and there were suggestions that a version, obviously with different lyrics and a very different vocal melody, was recorded. However, if this happened, they were destroyed, and apparently no copy exists. It starts with a typical Iommi riff, and it's not difficult to imagine Osbourne singing right over the top of it. However, when Dio starts to sing, the song gets a new lease of life and is completely taken to a different place than the original lineup would have managed. Iommi's slower, bluesy solo at the midway point is amongst his best before he throws in a couple of shorter, faster ones during the track, including a particularly nice fast one towards the end before he ends the song with a gentle acoustic outro. In fact, the song is the perfect vehicle for extended solos and improvisation, and it was not unusual for it to be extended over the 12-minute mark in a live setting. It has been suggested that the distinctive bass line was actually written by keyboard player Jeff Nichols, and it bears some similarity to the Quartz track Mainline Riders. The second half of the album is not quite on the same level as the first and starts with the pleasant but pretty ordinary Wishing Well. As with Lady Evil, this track does have a strong rainbow feel, and you can imagine that it could be one of the lyrics and melodies that Dio had in mind for his next album with Blackmore, and Blackmore not decided to go down the more poppy route. Die Young starts with a slow atmospheric guitar solo which was extended considerably during live performances before launching into a fast-paced stomp. Then the middle section of the song says it dropped down to a soft, acoustic, almost ballad-like pace, and Dio delivers a soft falsetto vocal before the song thunders back into full power again. Iommi's solo towards the end of the song is particularly fast, and the light and shade of the soft and heavy parts give the track its majesty. Craig Gruber once again has claimed that he brought the initial idea of this song and the tune to the table, but this has never been confirmed by any of the other members, and no writing credit was ever given to him. Walk Away is another pleasant enough song without ever really getting out of the ordinary, and along with Wishing Well would count possibly as the low point of the album. I mean, said that though, they're both pretty decent tunes in their own right. Throughout the whole album, you're reminded more of Dio's Rainbow albums than you are of Osbourne's Sabbath albums, and the final track, Lonely is the World, is maybe the biggest culprit, if culprit is the right word. An extended bluesy tune with a typical vocal from Dio, similar to many on his Rainbow albums, accentuates this point, as does the use of the strings during Iommi's closing solo. Still a great song though, and a great end to what is a classic album. When this first Black Sabbath album not to feature Ozzy Osbourne was unleashed on the world in April 1980, initially it met with a mixed response. Fans of Dio-era Rainbow loved it and took it to their hearts more than the current Rainbow album of the time, Down to Earth, which featured Graham Bonnet on vocals. Bonnet was often heckled at Rainbow gigs by fans calling for Dio. For many of them, this is the Rainbow album that never was, and is in many ways a natural progression from Live Rock and Roll from the Dio standpoint. And of course, it's a little ludicrous really though, as the music on the album was composed by Iommi, who is a far different guitarist and composer to Ritchie Blackmore. Lyrically and vocal melody-wise though, you have to accept that they had got something of a point. For some die-hard Ozzy Osbourne fans, a sense of loyalty to him made it difficult for them to accept Dio at first, but the diminutive singer's charisma and respect for the back catalogue soon helped him to win people over. A new era for Black Sabbath was born with a Devil's Horn salute. The first of three purple-tinted vocalists was now at the mic, and the future looked very bright indeed. Heaven and Hell is a classic rock album from a golden time of British rock music. Whether you think of it as a Black Sabbath album or as an album by a different band going up to that name, it is up to you. But to not listen to it and accept it for the classic album that it is, regardless of lineup, would just be plain stupid. Heaven and Hell, one of the best rock albums ever recorded. I hope you enjoyed tonight's episode of Crushed Custard. See you soon.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. Please like and subscribe as it helps the channel to grow. See you soon.